the actual minute, right? We should, because we have very little time.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. All right. Do you want to go, Fran? Hello, everyone.
Cool. Hello, everybody. We're gonna go ahead, Blaze, with the title of the presentation. Who you are? Who am I?
Yeah. So my name's Blaze. I'm a dev at Amazee Labs. I'm primarily working at the moment on automation stuff in the maintenance team. And Fran over here is our team lead, and he will introduce the rest of himself.
Cool. Hi, everybody. So I'm team lead of the web maintenance, our web maintenance team at Amazee as well. Blaze and I, we are going to do a presentation, a lightning talk about automating your web maintenance using Drutiny. So let me just jump to another window. The agenda for this next 15 minutes is going to be quickly talk about what we understand about web maintenance, same for automation, which challenges do we have, then introduce briefly Drutiny, and finally jump onto the implementation that we just put it all together. Cool. So when we talk about web maintenance, I think it's better to talk about goals. We've built a website, another agency has built a website. In any case, we want to maintain it. So what is the goal of a living website? We want to make sure that the software is secure. We want to make sure that the software is up to date. We also want the software to be performant, which if we tick the previous two boxes, it would be easier to achieve. Also important is we want to catch bugs quickly, fixes, so that we can just quickly react to it. And then if we tick all the previous boxes, again, we will have a reliable system that will allow to keep on extending, adding new feature, fixing new bugs, so that we can do all that process efficiently. So these are the main goals that we're going to have in mind. This is what we're going to be thinking of for the rest of the presentation. Blaze, over to you.
Cool. Yeah. So in terms of automation, what we really mean in this case is nothing new. In fact, like the entire history of computing and engineering from the beginning of recorded history is really the history in some respects of increasing abstraction and automation. But in this particular talk, we really are speaking about the kind of stuff that's connoted by automation in the industry, which is all of the DevOpsy tools, Ansible, AWX, and so on. But nothing that we say here, particularly in this talk, is going to be, it couldn't be achieved by like a well-written Perl script. So specifically, when we look at what we should automate and why we need automation, generally, it's it's just human frailty, pretty much. Often in the context of automation, we speak about getting rid of mundane or repetitive or boring tasks. But really, the point of automation is to kind of like patch over the places that we're not particularly good at. And those are things like, the fact that our brains evolved to really have a kind of limited working memory. We can only deal with a couple of things at a time. You can look at Miller's magic number magic number 7 plus or minus 2. That's some good cog sci for you. Essentially, we can only keep a couple of things in our head at once. And despite our brains actually being massively parallel processes, we're really not that good at multitasking. So when we speak about automation, we're really speaking about, how do we patch up those particular frailties in human beings? Cool.
Cool. So then, which are the main challenges when we start talking about mixing web maintenance, automation? So one of the key ones is longevity of a website. We want to keep a site that was built 5, 6, 7 years ago, we want to keep it relevant so that we can have a good return of investment. We are not talking of just a small marketing site. We might be talking of a big system where the client invested a huge amount of money. So it's important for them to have the site running during a long time so that they can actually get the return of what they invested. But also one of the main challenges in longevity is precisely the deprecation of platforms and code. We need to be aware of that. We need the code and everything needs to be evolving with the technology. So that's one of the main challenges. Cool. Over to you, Blaise.
So yeah, so you know, in the context of this particular talk, we're trying to figure out, well, we're showing something that we really aren't particularly good at. So what should we automate? And you'll find in this talk, one of the things that we're particularly interested in is not so much the part of, you know, DevOps, I suppose, that's about deploying things and making stuff happen, but rather gathering information at scale. So this is one thing that should be automated. And, you know, just in terms of the context of what kinds of things we should automate, just as I point out there, we should always automate things that we aren't particularly good at. So continually gathering information is something that we're not particularly good at, particularly at scale. You know, things that don't necessarily require human interaction as well to run smoothly. Humans are good at particular things. We can, you know, deal with a lot of context and so on. But you know, wherever we have a core of you know, something that can be done automatically, that doesn't have a lot of edge cases, that's a good candidate for automation. And in this case, what we're going to be discussing really is a way of gathering information, you know, a way that we gather information about all of our sites that can pretty easily be automated. Cool.
Cool. So sorry for the lightning speed, but time is the essence. So Drutiny is as well part of the presentation. Drutiny is the tool that we are using. Is a generic Drupal site auditing and optional remediation tool. So we can query our site for many different things, and Drutiny offers you a possibility to fix some of them. Basically, Drutiny is just a set of policies or a set of checks that you can run against any Drupal instance, and you can group all those policies into what is called a profile. Pretty much the only thing that's required is Drush, and then obviously SSH access to connect to the site. I've put in there a couple of links for you to read further on the documentation, GitHub repo, and all that. And yeah, that's on the right is a really tiny screenshot of what the output looks like. We can just check certain policies against a site, and Drutiny will give us pretty much a semaphore kind of output, green, red, or yellow, and then give us some suggestions. Cool. So now if we try to put all these things together, we've talked about web maintenance, automation, Drutiny. So let's try to explain yeah, our implementation of it. So I'll pass it on to Blaise again.
Cool. Yeah. So this is really the meat of it. I hope I can do it justice in 7 minutes. So the problem that we have right now is, you know, how do we get this tool on all of our sites? So let's say we've got, you know, like 4 dozen sites that we need to run Drutiny policies on. And really these policies could be anything that you can script out in PHP and run against Drush. What kind of, you know, which modules are outdated? You know, is there an unprotected admin account? There's pretty much, you know, just look at the Drutiny documentation to see the kinds of things you can check against your sites. So our problem in our team is how do we get these things, how do we get Drutiny onto the sites, and what do we do with the data that gets generated? So in terms of actually getting Drutiny out to the remote host, I think this may be the next slide, Fred. In terms of actually getting it out, we've tried a couple of things, and both of them work. The approach that we prefer, given the way that we host our sites, is to bundle Drutiny as part of a base image. So all of our sites get deployed on a standard base image, a standard Linux base image, and along with that comes a whole bunch of maintenance tools. And one of those tools that we have is Drutiny. We know, because all of our sites run on top of this base image, that if we connect to the site, we can just bang run Drutiny and it'll give us a list of all of our policies. That's one way of doing it. The only problem is that in our team, we have some sites that don't sit on our infrastructure. And for those sites, this obviously is not going to work because we can't, force people to run our base images on their systems. So the other way that we have investigated, and this is actually quite an effective route as well, is if you have SSH access and say wget access on the server that you're SSHing into, we build FAR releases of Drutiny that bundle a whole bunch of policies into it. We download that, we run it, and then we delete it, basically, right? So it's just download, run, delete. And that is how we run Drutiny on those sites. Cool. Those are the two approaches that we have to actually getting Drutiny onto the sites. That is the first problem. The second problem, as mentioned, is the problem of how do we get the data to us, or what do we do with the data, right? Because now we're not talking about a single site where we're just reading an output. We're reading like a markdown file or something. What we are talking about here is running this stuff across a whole bunch of sites and doing something with that data. Obviously, that's too much for any one person to really deal with. So one of the really nice things about Drutiny is that you can output its responses as a JSON, right? And how I've seen this been used in the past is, an enterprise will run Drutiny on all of their sites, driven by something like AWX. AWX will run an Ansible script that will just connect to all of the sites, run Drutiny with the specific policies. Let's say we want to do a security audit of all of our sites. We run the security policy audit, and AWX gathers up all of those JSONs that are delivered. And sorry about that, Boris. We gather up all of those JSONs and then we pass it at AWX to get out all of the data. That's one way of doing it. The problem with that is obviously you need to then pass everything in a single location, and you need to have SSH access into all of these systems. But this is done. You can pop that into via Logstash into the Elk stack. That's not how we do it internally. One of the things we do is we've actually extended Drutiny slightly, and Drutiny is really well architectured and very amenable to extension. And all we've done is added a formatter. There are various formatters that exist in Drutiny. You can output things as HTML, as I mentioned, JSON, as Markdown. What we've done is we've added a single formatter that all it does is, instead of simply outputting it, it actually just sends off the data to a webhook somewhere, to an endpoint. And we pass that on our side in a single place. That's built into Lagoon, where we host things at the moment. And for Boris, what that is that you actually see over there is just our internal tool that is showing the output of a Drutiny run for one of our sites. By gathering all of the data like that in a single place, we can then aggregate that data. We've got a few tools that we use then to actually say, these sites have these problems, and that bubbles up via either dashboards or notifications. And pretty much that's how we deal with all of that data. I know we have 1 minute left, so this is really lightning. But yeah, I would highly suggest that you check out Drutiny for this kind of thing. We haven't spoken about remediation at all. But I'm going to be here for the next few hours, and if anybody wants to speak about this, I've pretty much written the implementation inside of Lagoon and inside of ALGM, so I'm happy to answer any questions after this. Here we go.
Cool. Right time. Cool. So thank you very much, everybody. We know that this was a lot of information dumped to you in just 15 minutes. It's just the tip of the iceberg. but hopefully we'll get you into investigate a little bit more about it. And as Blaise mentioned, he will be available for the next few hours. So do ask him, because this is really, really cool stuff. Yeah, as I said, it's just a tiny portion of what we're working on. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Blaise.
Pleasure. Cheerio.
Thank you. I will share the link to the slides within seconds.